And there's been talk about a quote-unquote vaccine passport where, you have to prove you had the vaccine before you do this, or you can get on a flight, or you can, perhaps work in different places or what have you. And there are no rules about this that I'm aware of anywhere yet, but we've been concerned that that kind of thing could be implemented. And now the Spanish government is the first government that I'm aware of that has taken this step. And the French government now apparently is saying that they will be not registering people who refuse to take the vaccine, but making a list of the people who have taken the vaccine. And when reading about the French government, they are, reassuring their population that they will guard this list and keep it in the strictest
of confidence.
Where have we heard
this before?
Well, where have we heard this before? And of course, we know that eventually the database will be hacked. But if you're never going to make use of this list, if you have no intention of making use of this list,
why are you doing it?
Then why are you making it in the first place? So this is very troubling. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to us, and your country or the jurisdiction you live in has not started doing this yet, it may be worthwhile to pay attention to it, and rather than being reactive,
be proactive
and start to get out there now and say, this is not the way we deal with these problems, okay? Look, I don't know how effective this vaccine is going to be. I expect it'll be pretty effective, like all vaccines, but not 100% effective, okay? And I haven't decided whether I'm going to get it or yet. I'm leaning towards, when it becomes available for us peons, that I'll probably get it. But, if for people who don't want to get it, my attitude is big deal. I'm not afraid of COVID-19. I'm truly not. I look at the data, I look at the statistics, and I go, okay, nobody wants to get it. Nobody wants to catch the flu. Nobody wants to go out and get a head cold or whatever. But I'm truly, truly not afraid of contracting COVID-19. And
I was telling you before in our pre-production meeting when we were discussing the different topics for tonight's show that I had this conversation with my family doctor. And she assured me, she said, because I told her, look, I don't believe the masks. I don't think they work. Gave her a whole bunch of reasons. And she said, well, we have a different opinion on it. And I said, that's fine. I'm not trying to, I know you're just doing your job and that kind of thing. But that vaccine they can keep. I'm not interested in the vaccine in any way, shape, manner, or form. Not that I'm an anti-vaxxer. There's some very effective vaccines out there. Tuberculosis, polio, malaria, you name it. Every major disease has some kind of defense against it in the form of shape of a vaccine. I just don't want this one because I don't believe the threat's high enough to justify all the money we've spent on it so far and on the distribution. Even if they give us the vaccine for free, it's going to cost us billions because we have to ship it all over the country, keep it at -70, make sure that, that the whole logistics alone is going to cost us a fortune. So I'm not interested in playing the game. She said, well, we're never going to force you to ever take a vaccine. And I said, well, no, I hear you. I know I'm not suggesting you would. But what the government will do is they'll say, no, you don't have to take vaccine, but you can't fly commercially. Or you can't get on a train.
Or the worst possible one, you can't go to a hockey game.
That would be devastating. Or you can't participate in organized sports. Or you can't leave the province. All these restrictions.
You can't go to a movie theater without flashing your vaccine card.
And that sounds to me a lot like papers. You must have your papers.
So you're not wrong, Nick. This is a major concern, and it's there are a lot of people out there that are going to be listening to this that are going to what's the big deal? Look, I have to tell you, I've never had a flu vaccine. Every year I get told, you have to have your flu vaccine, and we're getting a little older and I have some health issues and that. So, my doctor was always saying it, and even my wife is saying it. And I go, I just don't see it. I have I have never heard of having to have these vaccines, and but it's a personal choice, for better or for worse. I'm not, I'm not holding anybody responsible for my personal choices and what have you. But this idea that we're going to not force people to have the vaccine, but we're going to penalize them for not having it, I just don't think that the data, as you say, supports that kind of a measure, and I have very real, serious concerns with that.
Well, you mark my words, that's the way they're going to do it.
And there are vaccines that they want you to have before, for instance, if you're going to enroll in school, you have to have certain vaccine your kids and stuff. And there are some parents who don't do it. Yep. And the consequence is you're not allowed to send your child to school.
Yeah. But you can easily work around that, though.
Well, in fact, you don't even have to tell. You haven't had to tell the authorities about it. But whether you do or you don't, okay, that's a far cry from having to carry an ID card to let you get into a grocery store or a movie theater
or get a job
or a bus or get a job or anything, or take a flight somewhere or a bus or whatever. So it's very troubling. And as I say, I think that people would be well advised to pay attention. This is starting to happen in certain countries in Europe. And I think that people would be well advised to be very proactive on this rather than waiting for the government to start to put plans in place and announce plans and then react to it and try to stop it that way. So that was kind of like my honorable runner-up mention.
All right, so what beats that?
Okay, so what beats that in my mind, Nick, is the cataclysmic degradation in the quality of the mainstream media over the course of this last 12 months. There's been problems with mainstream media. We've been complaining about it on this show. It's out there. Okay, this is not a surprise to anyone, especially to people who would be listening to us. I would expect, but I think that this year has seen a sharp deterioration in the quality of the news reporting out there, and some news places are reporting it, but it's not something that the mainstream media really has, I think, figured out yet. But I think that if I had to point to one story that I think is the biggest this year, it's that. It's just the complete collapse of integrity, honesty, impartiality, if you will, in the mainstream media, and the utter partisanship of it, the hyper partisanship. And the funny thing about this is, Nick, I am not one of those people that has been, banging the drums saying, oh, the media has to be impartial. We have to have a neutral media. You can't have opinions stated and stuff like that. I believe in freedom of the press. And I've always said that the reason we have freedom of the press is not to prevent or even promote press neutrality. It's because historically the press has not been neutral. And they've taken sides on political issues, etc. But I, in my life, have not ever seen it as out of control as it has been. And worse than that is the willful ignoring clear stories out there because it doesn't suit your particular political outlook, and the not just the self-censorship, but the censoring of other people. If you look at mainstream social media, Twitter, Facebook, in particular, that in the run-up to the U.S. election, we're basically refusing to allow the stories that were, I think, important stories to be disseminated using their platforms. So, if you look at the big picture, I just think, that mainstream media news media is, I hesitate to say it's dead, but it's dying. It's on life support, and I don't know what will revive it, if anything can revive it.
Maybe it should be allowed to die. And one of the reasons I say that is your story earlier about the Boy Scouts. I mean, not one word in that AP story that you were reading from mentioned the fact that this is all caused by activists, judges, and activists within the social playing field that caused this whole mess in the first place. Not one word of that.
Unintended consequences, maybe, but consequences nonetheless. And I think that has to be. I think they had to be part of that story, and it wasn't. It was nowhere did I see one word.
Now, north of the border, back here in Canada, a lot of the sting was taken out of a lot of the stories that plagued this government from January, February, all the way back to Vice Admiral Norman, right up to, let's say, the Wee scandal. We've got a whole year's worth of scandals, which we did not cover tonight because you could spend hours and hours and hours going over it. But $650 million to support print media in this country. I mean, first of all, if you're running a struggling paper, how hard is that to resist? So once you dip into that, you dip your ladle into that bucket, now you're beholden to it, because now you begin to form your budgets based on that money, and all of a sudden you have to bow down to the altar of whoever's doling it out, and you become their slave. And you can say the odd bad thing, but don't you get real hard on them, like, don't become a rebel media, don't become a this, don't become a that, because, boy, that money just might dry up. That's a powerful thing to hold over somebody's head if you're trying to keep a major newspaper in Canada afloat. So Trudeau bought a lot of favor with those papers, all the major papers, by that $650 million loan or grant, call it what you want, support, taxpayer money. And I think that you're onto something, and it kind of ties in with my number one top story. But I'll let you finish up with this one.
No, I'm finished, Nick. I don't know what more I could say about it. We could go on and on, but we'd only be repeating ourselves. I just the demise of mainstream media, of journalism as a trade. It's just it's shameful. It's so unfortunate, and. Nobody does real journalism anymore. There may be a handful of people, but most of what I read in the mainstream media is they're just regurgitated stories that so-called reporters.
My wife first figured this out. We were driving from Windsor to back to the Valley, and you know how much I like talk radio.
Sure.
So every time the news came on, we were near a different city.
Right.
And every single time the news came on, it was exactly the same stories, with maybe the odd local story thrown in. So when you got to London, they had the same general newscast. When you got up to Toronto, they had the same thing. When you got to Barrie or Peterborough, it was the same thing. All the way home, right up into the Valley, the same stories over. And how could that possibly be? If you have independent journalism representing, even if they are biased, like I would much rather read a paper that I know is biased, like the Toronto Star, as much as I think it's the Commie Star. Okay, the Commie Star that runs the
Red Star.
The Red Star. That's the word I'm looking for.
Pravda.
Yeah, Pravda. At least I know what I'm reading and where it's coming from. It's like Peter Mansbridge saying, "I'm biased. I'm unbiased." Like hell you are. You get paid by the tax dollar. You work for the CBC. You're not unbiased. You're a socialist. At least have the guts and the courage to say so. So that's when that really came home to her when we took that drive. I'd known about it for a long time, but she figured it was just me venting until she took that drive with me and we came up north.
Right. Well, this is it. It's regurgitated news.
Over and over again.
Nobody looks at a story anymore and goes, okay, that doesn't make sense. I'm going to pursue this angle. I'm going to dig here.